Good morning. Okay. It's Resistance Live for the 25th of January, 2024. Nice to see you all here. Hey, Pittsburgh. Hey, Berkeley. Hey, Puyallup. Hi, Philadelphia. Nice to see you all. Hey, Coeur d'Alene. We got people from all over the country as usual. Hi, Queens. Always happy to see my friends from New York City. It's ECM. This is Resistance Live for the 25th of January. I already said that. I'm coming to you, as always, from occupied Tongva land here in Southern California. Today, for our visually challenged viewers, my hair is down, and I am wearing a black fuzzy sweater with my big gold hoops. My skin is pink. My eyes are green. My hair is dirty blonde, although I have a few new blonde streaks in it. And I'm sitting in front of my big plant and my lamp, and I'm in my office. Thank you all for being here. Okay, so I got to tell you, as much as I sit here all the time talking about how the GOP is going to do what it's going to do, and we've got to keep doing the work, and all of that is true, okay? I just have to say that I spent the morning doing final edits on an interview with Alex Mohajer, who's running for the California State Senate here for our Mobilize 2024 program. And he talked so much about the fact that we've got to keep our nose to the grindstone, and we've got to really stay focused on local and state mobilization, because it's where so many of the fascist incursions are happening right now. And he is right. And the reason why I am walking my fine line this morning between outrage and doing the work is because of everything that's happening in Texas and also in the Capitol building. Because for those of you who have not been following this, the Supreme Court ruled earlier this week that the fencing that had been put up by the Texas National Guard had to come down so that our federal border patrol could patrol the federal border consistent with the Constitution. Greg Abbott has defied the Supreme Court order. And this morning we have Speaker of the House Mike Johnson saying that he stands with Greg Abbott on doing so. Now, I have to point something out. There is a historical precedent for this, which Beto O'Rourke is talking about this morning on Threads. Namely, when Arkansas, Little Rock, Arkansas, mobilized their state National Guard to prevent the desegregation of Little Rock schools. And what happened at the time, after Brown versus Board of Education, was that the president at the time, President Eisenhower, federalized the Arkansas National Guard, which is something that is within the authority of a president to do. And essentially what it does is it puts the National Guard under the authority of the federal government so that they cannot take orders from the state. We're in a situation right now where what is happening in Texas, as I've been pointing out now for more than a week, is a grave constitutional crisis. It really borders on Confederate revolt. And Greg Abbott refusing to do what the Supreme Court has ordered him to do, and now the Speaker of the House coming out and saying he's going to do the same, is really a constitutional crisis. Like we just have to call it what it is. It is truly something that borders on sedition. And one of the things that I want everybody to be aware of is that this is not just something that should worry us all. It's also something that's being particularly engineered to create the illusion of an overwhelming crisis at the border so that Donald Trump can potentially get reelected. And everybody on the Hill, including Mitt Romney this morning, who is taking orders from Donald Trump to not provide additional funding, both to Ukraine and to the southern border, who are literally like walking away from a deal that would create incredible resolutions to what potential issues exist at our southern border and would also give additional funding to Ukraine. The fact that they are all walking away from it is for one purpose only. And that is because they have literally nothing else to run on in 2024, and they want a crisis. They want to be able to say there's a crisis at the border, and they want to be able to blame Joe Biden for it. Mitt Romney, for all of his garbage takes about how Donald Trump is so bad for everything, is literally out there this morning saying that it's Joe Biden's fault. He's not saying it in exactly those words, but it's pretty close. It's like, if you're the president, you should fix this issue without demanding that other people do it. It is literally propping up a presidential candidate who can't string a sentence together because they have nothing else to run on. So I want everybody to be very, very clear that not only is what Abbott is doing unlawful and unconstitutional and in defiance of the principles of our federalized democracy, but it's also being done at the orders of Donald Trump and at the instruction of Donald Trump. And we know that Mike Johnson is talking to Donald Trump. And we know, by the way, that Mitch McConnell is talking to Donald Trump. Mitch McConnell was out yesterday saying that he's caving on the issue of Ukraine funding and funding for the border because it wouldn't be good for Trump. So I'm fed up and frustrated this morning, as I'm sure you are as well. I'm really just disgusted, frankly, with all of this, not to mention the fact that the actual human cost of this kind of power play is real. We had a mother and her 2 children drown in the Rio Grande. That's what set off this entire emergency petition to the Supreme Court. We have people at the border who, frankly, are perfectly pleased and even joyful over the idea of brown people dying, trying to get into this country to flee violence when they have a lawful right to do it. And on top of it, we have a potential massive international crisis that would allow Vladimir Putin to take over Ukraine and threaten the rest of Europe if additional funding is not approved. It's stupid. Like, on top of the fact that it's just an engineered crisis, it's stupid. It literally is going to cause generations of damage to our international diplomacy. So all of this is being weaponized and farmed and created, all right? And one of the things that I have to remind everyone of is that this is what fascist regimes do, okay? They create crisis. They create, like drama and claims that we need somebody who can come in as a strong man and fix everything. This is all very much consistent with the fascist playbook, all right? And one of the things that I want everyone to understand here is that Abbott is defying conservatives on the Supreme Court who said that he was out of line. Because I'm going to remind everybody, this is a 5-4 split. There are 2 conservative justices that joined with the majority on this. It's not like you get to kind of like say, man, not today. Just deciding randomly, I'm not going to follow Supreme Court authority today. I don't think this is going to play well. And the flip side of it, from the standpoint of where we all sit, is that people are dying. And, I have to point out, this is also on the heels of reporting over the last 24 hours about the fact that there have been 26,000 rapes in Texas that have resulted in pregnancy since Texas banned abortion. I just want you to imagine the experience of being a rape victim, being forced to carry your rapist's baby to term, because that is what Greg Abbott has engineered in Texas. And from the standpoint of where we all sit in relation to this, this is one reason why the mobilization that we do at the state and local level matters so much. Okay. And I know, again, I've been writing this for a very long time now here on the broadcast, like at least the last 3 or 4 years, that your state and local mobilization is where it's at. Like, the time that you need to dedicate to getting out the vote right now has to be for state and local candidates who stand for democracy and stand for progressive principles. That is where the real work lies this year. Yes, we have work to do on behalf of Joe Biden. Yes, we have work to do on behalf of our national elections. Don't get me wrong. But the real work, the place where if you have to split up your time and your energy, you should probably split it like 70-30, should be going in favor of what's happening at the state level if you live in a state where this kind of garbage is underway. It's just incredibly key at this point to getting it done. And I'm just going to say one other thing here. Biden should enforce it. Yes, they have engineered a total cluster. Part of the problem here is that Abbott is invoking the supreme law of Texas. Well, I got news for you. In the United States of America, under our federal constitution, the supreme law of Texas doesn't trump the Supreme Court. And, everybody who was here, I always have to do this gesture for my ex-Columbia law professor lecture 5 years ago about the pyramid of our federal legal system, knows that it all ends at the Supreme Court. You may have a federal system and a state system, but the Supreme Court is the ultimate arbiter of the law. And if the Supreme Court says you've overstepped, take down the fence, you better frickin' do it. Now, we're in a situation where this may result in armed conflict, unless, of course, Joe Biden does what I've described at the very beginning and what Beto O'Rourke is recommending this morning, which is federalizing the Texas National Guard, which he can, in fact, do. If he does that, the Texas National Guard will take orders from the federal government. And I strongly recommend that, not that I have any say over it, but I strongly recommend that next step because, by the way, the white supremacists are going to white supremacist. And, there is a very strong parallel here to what happened with Ruby Bridges walking into school under, protection of federal authorities as a child because white supremacists didn't want to integrate Little Rock schools. Like, this is what it is, okay? And it is exactly the same thing. And so there is a solution. And yes, the GOP will scream about it. My response to that is, so I'm not actually going to say that out loud on YouTube, but you get my point, okay? I personally think that this has reached a breaking point right now. Now, I have to point something else out in relation to this because what Abbott is doing is being amplified by foreign actors on a movement that is now being referred to as Texit, okay? Like Brexit, to get Texas to secede from the Union. I'm just going to point out, I don't think there's any way this is going to fly. And I also want to point out that a lot of these secessionist movements are actually Russian psyops. That one of the things that we have to be aware of in this age of massive disinformation, more on that in a minute, is that every crisis will be exploited by people who want to destroy American national and international security efforts. So we're going to see an amplification of the idea that Texas should just secede. And I'm just going to say to all of you, 2 of my team members are in Texas, one of whom is trans, one of whom is a mother with kids in Texas public schools. I do not want Texas to secede from the Union because it will mean death for a lot of people. So I don't want anybody taking up that talking point. Oh, let them go. Oh, the voters should know better. Please don't do that. All right. Texas is in a stranglehold with far-right fascist Republicans right now, many of whom were not legitimately elected due to voter suppression efforts. And so from the standpoint of where we sit on all of this, the federal government has to step in. And from the standpoint of where we are right now, I think the Democrats should be shouting from the rooftops, frankly, that the Republicans on the Hill are creating a crisis. They are creating a crisis at the border because they have nothing else to stand on. They have done nothing while they have had power in the House. They haven't passed a single piece of legislation that benefits Americans. They have no platform to go back to their own home countries, counties and territories and states to run on at all. And they have a demented, malignant narcissist with a pound of bronzer on his face who can't string a sentence together as their candidate. So the only thing they've got is the fascist claim that there's a crisis at the border that is going to come in and flood white America with poisoned blood, in the words of Adolf Hitler. That's all they've got. And everybody needs to see this for what it is. It is a manufactured crisis they are refusing to solve because it's the only way that they can see to seize power and keep it forever. We have to talk about it. We have to be loud about it. We have to describe it for exactly what it is. And yes, it's horrifying. And the human cost is disgusting. It's despicable. And I have to say on an international level, I also just find it absolutely horrifying. We're going to let Ukraine fall to Vladimir Putin. That's a great idea. So yeah, I'm a little wound up about this right now. And I want everybody to be very well aware that all of this is on purpose. It is intentional. It is at the instruction and to prop up Donald Trump. And it is nothing else. It is nothing else. So folks should very effectively be talking about this. And I hope you've taken some notes on what I'm saying today, because these are the talking points, right? The GOP is engineering a crisis and maintaining a crisis, both internationally and at our southern border, because they have nothing else to run on. That's what this is. It's also sedition, but that's another story. All right. Okay. I want to talk a little bit about the issue of the DC ruling on immunity. I know everybody's waiting on it, all right? I know that. There is no predictable timetable. Many of us are quite shocked that we are now approaching week 3 of waiting for this ruling. And yes, I know that Alex Wagner has been talking about it and other people have been talking about it, and I've been talking about it because I honestly thought it was going to take 5 days max. I don't think that there is any reason to suspect that this is intentional. And I'm just going to say that. All right. Yes, I think the DC Circuit understands the urgency. We do not know what is happening, and we will never know what is happening inside the chambers of these 3 justices. I think they are moving as quickly as they can. And so for the moment, we're going to ride it out. And I just want to say one thing. They rule tomorrow. They rule next week. We're still going to have a trial date for Trump with it, unless the Supreme Court does something crazy, which they're actually not going to do because they're ruling on the issue of the Colorado ballot initiative, sometime in early February. Oral argument is scheduled for February 8th. The worst case scenario is that we have a trial that starts in May. Okay. And so I don't want anybody panicking over this. I do not think they're going to grant absolute presidential immunity. I don't know how many times I have to say it here, because if they did, Joe Biden could execute Donald Trump in the street and never face prosecution. He could literally round up the Speaker of the House and Mitch McConnell and Matt Gaetz and anybody else and dump him in Guantanamo Bay and never face prosecution. That is not going to happen. The Supreme Court is not going to grant absolute presidential immunity. All right. So I think what they want is an absolutely bulletproof ruling that is beyond reproach and beyond reversal. That, I think, is what is going on. And these are very astute judges. I have to remind everybody, the DC Circuit is the #1 feeder court to Supreme Court nominations and has been for generations. They are incredibly effective jurists. So I don't want anybody thinking that anybody's been bought. You know, none of those like crazy conspiracy theories here. Let's just understand that like this is one of the most important rulings in United States history, and they are taking a little bit of extra time. And, you know, I got to remind everybody, when I litigated a case in front of the DC Circuit, it took from the moment that appeal was granted until the moment I got an order almost a year. It took 6 months from oral argument to the ruling dropping. So, you know, we're like less than 3 weeks in right now. All right. We shall see. All right. I want everybody to also be aware that we have ongoing issues related to Donald Trump right now and his circle that are underway. The E. Jean Carroll trial has resumed. This morning, one of E. Jean's editors from Elle magazine has been on the stand. Alina Habba has moved for another mistrial on the grounds that allegedly E. Jean Carroll couldn't string harm to Donald Trump's defamation. Give me a break. They had expert testimony on it. She testified on it. Again, it's like the terrible, non-effective, ridiculous lawyering strategy that we have seen from Alina Habba and all of Trump's lawyers, frankly, with very few exceptions over the last few years. All right. So that is underway. I'm going to tell you all, I think that case is going to the jury no later than tomorrow. And I think that we're going to end up with a very quick ruling and an enormous judgment against Donald Trump as a result of this. I'm also just going to tell you all, he spent hours last night on Truth Social defaming E. Jean Carroll again, like 30 posts on Truth Social defaming her again. And you can be guaranteed that that also will come into evidence, because everything that he's done since the second trial started, Robbie Kaplan has put in evidence in that trial. He does not stop. And all of this is fuel for an incredibly large punitive damages award that may not ever stop him, but at the bare minimum is going to hurt really bad, like maybe be the end of all of his personal income for the rest of his life. So I want everyone to be very aware, because there were some pleas this morning for good news, all right, on the Patreon feed. By the way, if you want to ask me questions in advance of every broadcast, you can become a Patreon subscriber for as little as $2 a month over at patreon.com/resistancelive and support this broadcast and our wonderful team and all the hard work that goes into being here 6 days, actually 6 days a week. Okay. One of the things I want everyone to be aware of, if you're looking for good news, is that that is coming, and it's not going to be a kind of like minor verdict. Like, there's not a snowball's chance in hell. He's already been found liable. She's established compensatory damages of between $6 and $12 million. We saw what happened with Ruby Freeman and Shay Moss against Rudy Giuliani. This is not going to be a small punitive damages verdict. Okay. And so if you can hang on and sit tight, there's going to be some serious pain dropped on Donald Trump in the next few days. All right. You need that. It's coming. All right. You can like take that to the bank. All right. Peter Navarro is being sentenced today for defying Congress. And again, I have to remind everybody, this is a misdemeanor. I do not want anybody freaking out and doing another, like, why is Steve Bannon walking around here? This is not a felony conviction. All right. They have asked for 6 months in prison for him. I do not know whether or not the judge is going to give it to him at that level. I'm also just going to remind everybody, Steve Bannon is still walking around because it's a misdemeanor. Okay. Please do not read anything into the fact that Peter Navarro and Steve Bannon defied congressional subpoenas and they're still walking around pending appeal. If that is what has happened to Peter Navarro, it may not be. Okay. I want everybody to understand that that is not a comparator to what is going to happen with Donald Trump. All right. You do not get convicted of felonies and end up walking around while there's an appeal pending. That does not happen. Okay. Like if it did, people who committed murder and rape and massive financial fraud and, you know, all the kinds of cases that I used to be involved in would still be walking around. They're not. They're like sent to the clink when they're convicted, or at the bare minimum, like as soon as they're sentenced. So nobody should be, you know, raising issues of concern about this if Peter Navarro doesn't get what, like, you know, we think he's going to get. All right. Okay. I have to talk again. I know this is like a very regular topic here today, but I'm going to end on this issue. Chris Hayes posted a very interesting thread last night on Threads about the issue of how much incredible foreign disinformation is floating around on TikTok right now about Joe Biden and Israel and Gaza. And, you know, raise the question from a legitimate standpoint as a journalist as to whether or not people were aware of how much disinformation is floating around over there that is amplifying a small minority of people who think that somehow Joe Biden can stop Benjamin Netanyahu from like committing genocide, or who, think that we should elect Trump instead, right? That we should just like sit back and do nothing and sit this election out because, you know, fascism in America will be so good for the people of Gaza. I'm being sarcastic. I have to say that I thought it was a really astute question, and he immediately got slammed by people for asking what is a really legitimate question. So I'm going to put my 2 cents in on this, all right? Because I have been in touch and have actually had conversations and have interviewed, for purposes of our Mobilize 2024 program that's currently ongoing, senior officials in the DNC. All right. And I am just going to tell you without revealing anything, because none of this is on tape. I'm just going to share my anecdotal experience. All right. I'm going to tell you that they are very aware of this, and they understand that TikTok is a foreign influence operation, to put it mildly. Okay. And I'm going to also say this. This is one reason why the Biden campaign is considering getting on TikTok. I want you all to understand something, and I want it to be like really clear, because I've said it here many, many times, but I've reached kind of a breaking point on this. All right. What the studies show of Gen Z is that Gen Z is mobilizing for Joe Biden like never before. All right. And if people are only getting their news from TikTok, they are being preyed upon by disinformation. There is an enormous amount of news out about this right now, about how so many of these TikToks that are going viral contain false information. They contain false information about Gaza. They contain false information about Yemen. And I'm just going to say one other thing here. Do not discount. I'm not discounting in any way, shape, or form that what is happening in Gaza is abhorrent. You know, I'm a former human rights lawyer, apart from anything else. I have a deep understanding and have said it from the beginning here that there are enormous violations of war crime statutes, of customary international law, of human rights provisions of the UN Charter going on in Gaza. There's absolutely no question about it. And anyone who is laying this at the foot of the Biden administration without taking account of what Netanyahu has done when there have been demands from Biden and Harris and Blinken and others to stop what is going on, to end the crisis, to reach a ceasefire, to find other ways of providing humanitarian aid to Gaza. Anybody who thinks that that is to be laid at the foot of Joe Biden is being preyed upon by disinformation. And I'm saying that to people in our own audience who are posting about it daily on Patreon because I'm fed up. I'm fed up. At this moment in time, there is an equation that people have to come to about where we sit in relation to all of this, all right? And I know that there are people who are going to say, and I've said it myself, that the funding issue is of concern. The funding issue concerns me, okay? And if you cannot hold a nuanced position about where we sit in relation to this election, if you cannot hold a nuanced position about what Netanyahu is doing of his own volition, for his own agenda, for his own reasons, and you're going to hold that against Joe Biden and Kamala Harris, you are sorely mistaken in your position and your opinions right now about the approach to the 2024 election. Period. And I honestly am at a point about this where like, I'm so done with this. I'm so done with it that I think that we've got to be talking very clearly about what is happening on TikTok as psyops and disinformation campaigns and attempts to interfere in the 2024 election, attempts to get Trump elected. There are people out there this morning who are rightfully pointing out that Netanyahu and Putin are waiting it out. They are stringing it out. They are continuing violence and bombing and everything else because they want Donald Trump in office, because that will allow them to do this carte blanche. That's the result of this particular effort to undermine Biden's reelection campaign on the basis of what Netanyahu is doing in Gaza. And if you don't see it, I don't know what to tell you any longer, because two things are true at once. Right? And this is like really where I want to leave it today. Okay. Two things are true at once. What Netanyahu is doing, what Israel is doing in Gaza, is a massive human rights violation. There was a report yesterday that 400,000 people in Gaza are at risk of famine. This is an engineered starvation of people, okay? It is abhorrent. And we also know that Biden and Harris and Blinken and our State Department and everyone else is pleading for the ability to be able to just get over the border to provide humanitarian aid. They are pleading for a ceasefire. Okay, this has been reported and it's not being amplified. Why is it not being amplified? Because the people who don't want it amplified and who are amplifying other things desperately want Trump reelected. That's why. That's why. So what I really want people to grasp here, okay, is that Trump and Netanyahu and Putin are cut from the same cloth. And if you're going to run around and do all this Genocide Joe stuff, you better be prepared for what's going to be wrought on Gaza if Trump is reelected. Because I don't even know what to tell you about what's going to happen next. So it's time to get on board. It's time to get on board. And it's time to get on board with like reality rather than the propaganda that is being spewed all over places like TikTok that are claiming that somehow Joe Biden is responsible for this. He is not. He is not. And while we may disagree with funding, we may disagree with whether or not the public pressure has been enough. And I have to remind everybody, nobody has any idea what's happening behind the scenes here. We may disagree with that, but our job as Americans is to fight for him to do something different, not to undermine his presidential campaign so that we have a fascist in office who literally will encourage Netanyahu to wipe Gaza off the face of the earth. Are we clear on this now? Like, do people get it? Because I have to say that I withheld on this for a really long time in the interests of being generous and in the interests of being understanding to people who maybe are being preyed upon and don't realize it. But I got to tell you, you walk into my own community and you throw this nonsense around, like enough is enough. Enough is enough, right? We can demand a return of the hostages. We can demand that, Israel stop putting prisoners from Gaza in conditions like Abu Ghraib. We can demand an end to bombing. We can demand an end to all of it. And if Netanyahu doesn't do it, like, what do you want? What do you want? Like, again, like the end result of this is Trump's reelection. And that, I just have to say it, is end game for Gaza. So people need to get really, really clear. And I'm sorry for getting like really irate and fed up about it. And I know somebody's going to complain again about how I'm yelling. I had to block people on YouTube yesterday who were like, why are you so loud? It's because I care. It's because I care. And it's because I care about it through a lens of like understanding the nuance of where we sit. I care about it, from the context of somebody who worked and lived in DC for 9 years, who went to law school there, who did collaborative efforts on the Hill. I approach it from the position of a lifelong activist, an ex-human rights lawyer, somebody who desperately cares about democracy and the future of this nation because people's lives are on the line, right? That's why I'm so loud and angry about it, because it makes me mad when people are not clear-headed enough to see this through the lens of what they are being talked into, because that's what it is. That's what it is. And if you are disgusted by what is happening in Gaza, because I know I am, the solution to that is not to undercut Biden's 2024 campaign. It's to push the Biden administration to push harder. It is not to reelect Donald Trump, because that will be the end, by the way, of like Gaza, Muslims in America, every person who's Latino here. It will be concentration camps at the southern border. And you know what? I know there are plenty of people on TikTok who are dismissing this, and those people are a part of the problem. Those people are a part of the problem. People who are mocking people like me, who are saying, like, look at the reality. They are part of the problem. And if those are the people you're following, I don't know what to tell you. You need to get your algorithm re-engineered. All right. That's it. It's another rant. I'm sorry. Actually, I'm not. But, some days I have to come on here because I've just had it. And I know you all are sometimes in that state as well. All right, my friends. I want people to hit the like button and hit the subscribe button. And I appreciate you. I'm going to tell you right now that I've started muting and deleting and banning people who are furthering propaganda that undercuts democracy in America on this very feed and on Patreon. And I will continue to do it. And I'm okay with it. I've reached my breaking point. So that's that. I hope you all have a fantastic Thursday. There's going to be a lot of breaking news about Trump and these trials and everything else coming forward. I also just want to remind you all that we are facing down quite an enormous amount right now of misogynist commentary about Nikki Haley. Don't make me defend Nikki Haley. She's a fascist in a skirt. Please do not be out there backing Nikki Haley, because she's for a national abortion ban and she's not a feminist. So I just want everybody to be aware that that's circulating quite a bit. And I love you guys. That's it. Even when I'm frustrated. All right. I will catch you all here live tomorrow, regular time. Progressive Coffee Hour is happening this Sunday, which is, wait for it, our 7-year anniversary of this broadcast. Oh my God. You want to know what it was? Because I'm going to remind the newbies here. My 7th year anniversary, what happened 7 years ago on Sunday was that I was outside the Brooklyn courthouse the night that the Muslim ban was stayed by the ACLU. I was in the crowd protesting after there had been a rollout at JFK and they were calling for lawyers to help process people at the airports. I was a part of all of that. So one of the things that I find not too ironic about my little rant that I just went on is that he has promised the return of all of that against Muslims. And if you think that's not going to include Gazans, I got another thing coming for you. All right. That's it, my friends. Much love, everybody. I will catch you all here live tomorrow. Bye.